So today we will look at the second part of the series. Um, so I'm going to discuss different types of nucleation. Uh, you have fairly a good idea that what are the processes through which a typical reaction undergo in a beaker. Most of them are quite messy and quite fast, but to simplify the life, processes are categorized into two categories. Let me look at my pen. Yes. So nucleation, two types of nucleation. One is primary and another is secondary. Primary, obviously, you have homogeneous and heterogeneous. Primary nucleation does not require uh, the same system. I mean, it does not require. Uh, Secondary nucleation is, uh, I mean, as you can see that it is induced by the same crystals itself. You might have seen in some reactions that uh, there is kind of like a flower structure. So what I mean to say that the primarily preformed crystals or seeds, they provide nucleating centers. So the facets of that crystals provides, I think I have discussed in past with some of you. So it is quite frequent in the reaction. So what I mean to say that all these three processes can happen simultaneously in a typical reaction. It does not. Please do not think that a typical reaction will be either homogeneous or heterogeneous or secondary. It can take these three processes. Most of the time they coexist because you have a substrate which is provided by uh, all kinds of container surfaces, right? It is mentioned here, and impurities. You might be having impure phases in the solution. Some dust impurities, even bubbles actually, right? Bubbles are considered as a new, impurity sites actually because there is a missing, volume there. So you might have grain boundaries, dislocations. So there are so many structural, inhomogeneities where you can have. So they provide actually. Why do we need uh, a secondary site for nucleation to happen? See, try to understand the basic principle that we will discuss it in energetic, uh, uh, energy form. That in order to create a surface, there is always a threshold energy requirement. So what I mean to say that you have to give some energy in order to gain some energy. So there is an initial energy barrier which needs to be crossed. It does not always just require supersaturation. You may have supersaturation in the container, but it does not mean that there will be a precipitation of another phase. Okay, so there is always an energy barrier which needs to be crossed. So the easiest way of that energy barrier, the pathway to proceed is the inhomogeneity or the structural inhomogeneity or some substrate. And thin film deposition is a perfect example where substrate plays a major role. That is always heterogeneous nucleation, unless it is happening before the matter lands up onto the surface. I mean, the nucleation can be triggered. I'm talking about the vapor phase deposition. So many times nucleation uh, can also trigger when you are sending a beam of atoms or molecules or smaller clusters in the deposition chamber. So even before they lands up, if the concentration is too high, so there can be a smaller forms of like embryo in the vapor phase, and then those things lands up on the surfaces. Then you have the heterogeneous nucleation and growth anyway. So, so this surface provides ideal site for that energy barrier to cross, actually, right? Will discuss about this energy barrier. And uh, there is something called critical radius of nuclei. So that if the size of that nucleus is above that critical radius, then those nuclei will survive. Otherwise, they will dissolve back. Those while ripening. So, there is a threshold, actually. Of course, there is. I mean, that critical radius is again decided by factors you already know, but we'll discuss one by one. So I think by now you have fairly good idea that actual reaction is quite complex, and it can be a combination of all these three. So that's the reason that you have multiple morphologies, and also there is a tendency that once the nuclei is formed, when it is going to the seed state, when the atom addition, like what we discussed yesterday in the first part, uh, there can be a change in the crystalline phase. It can happen because every nuclei has its own story, uh, like twins, actually, right? The twin, they are more or less genetically similar, but their habits are different. So the crystal habits are very different from seed to seed. No two particles are the same. Please note that when you do a synthesis, no two particles are exactly same with each other. There must be some difference. Actually. There is some subtle difference. So, okay, so there may be different facets. There may be some mix of phases. There can be some interchange at any time, because those that formation of nuclei is an individual event. There may be the several nuclei might be forming simultaneously, but the micro environment around that formation of nuclei is never the same. Though you try to keep the conditions, chemical conditions, exactly the same, it happens everywhere, even in the silicon industry. We always see that, but it depends upon what level you are looking for, what level the information you're looking for. That's the reason that you sometimes even get shape inhomogeneity, not just the size inhomogeneity. Sometimes you get crystalline phase inhomogeneity within a same system. For example, you have titania, so you can have mix of phases because microenvironment is different around the each nuclei. Please note that. So if you keep the microenvironment as similar as possible, then there is a tendency that you will get not only the monodispersed particles, also mono-shaped particles. Right, the shape will be the same. Obviously, monodispersed is mostly for the size, but shape is also included. Right. So let us go to the next slide. Um, yeah. Um, So we already discussed that these boundaries of nucleation and growth and further oswald ripening, digestive ripening, so on and so forth, they merge with each other. I mean, there is no, you can't say that right now only nucleation is happening because it's very difficult to say. All these processes uh, happen simultaneously. So new nuclei keep on forming, they keep on dissolving. So they are not at all completely unconnected with each other. They, all the steps are interdependent. It's a continuous process, right? Right. Like you see in the universe, the formation of new stars, the death of the old stars. It's a continuous process of evolution, even in the human life. And as I mentioned, that there is a possibility that there is a polymorphic modification. It's very important. You see it all the time. Phase transitions can happen, and that's what I mentioned. That crystals formed at slightly different time. It's like, we have like astrology in the some people believe on that. So basically, it depends upon what time and place you are born. So the conditions are different, right? So it is when you ponder about your TM images or X-ray diffraction and and other data, you must keep it in mind that you are looking at a universe beside the TM. Actually, you're not looking at the same system. Every particle has a different story to tell. Okay, please note that every particle has its own personality. Okay, uh, I'm repeating it. I think you will meditate over this very serious sentence. Every single particle has its own different personality. So it has to be treated that way. Don't expect uh, all the particles, all the systems in a TM grid or in X-ray diffraction when you have millions of tiny crystallites giving you the overall peaks. It's the averaged out information you are getting in X-ray diffraction out of uh, uh, it's like a country actually of a billion people actually. Please look at from that perspective. I hope that with these with this insight you will start seeing uh, your reaction vessel in a very different way. It's not it's not there is a diversity. Okay, so there is a diversity always. There is a rich diversity there. Okay, so supersaturation, all of you know. I don't need to discuss that. But how do you achieve the supersaturation? There are many ways you do that. I mean, most of them are trivial to discuss here, but just I have summarized them. Like you can cool, heat. For example, you can supercool, undercool, or overheat. For example, you want to it depends upon what kind of phase transition you're looking at. Because you're looking from liquid to solid, for example, in water, then you would like to cool it, and then you have to nucleate a new phase, which is ice out of water, right? And you sometimes would like to evaporate the solvent, so you play with the concentration. You mix solutions, right? Different. You play with the pH. Sometimes you increase the pH. For example, in case of ferrite, you put NaOH solution. Sometimes you dialyze the solution. You put a dialysis bag. So there are many tricks you play. What do you do? Basically, you try to uh, um, play with the uh, uh, concentration of your monomers, right? And also the collision between the, see, more important is basically the collision events between the atoms, which can be atoms or molecules. Or so these atoms basically form dimers, trimers. They, when they collide with each other, right? So just imagine the suspension reaction in a different way. There is a constant bombardment is happening between solute and solvent molecules. Constant bombardment, actually, right? Constant. And then thermal activation energy, it plays a big role. Temperature plays a big role, and okay, and also the cohesive energy and adhesive energy, they play a major role. What is the affinity of monomer to monomer, whether the monomer has more affinity towards other molecules, other types of molecules like solvent molecules, or the container walls. Uh, so those things are different actually, and different time, different length scales, the affinities can change. It's not the same. I mean, when the phase is formed, so chemistry is also changing of the same phase. So when it is in the monomer form, so it may not have affinity to, for example, to the container surfaces. But when the phase is formed, for example, if you are making silicon oxide, So if you take the precursors may not have same affinity towards the container wall. But when you have the seeds or nuclei of silicon oxide, they may like to sit close to the container wall because it provides them same substrate. So you may find some coating on the container wall, right? When you see that there is a lot of coating on your container walls, that's exactly the um, uh, the heterogeneous nucleation. So everything is happening. There are all possibilities. So let us now dive deeper into the energetics, and that will help you to uh, get some deeper insight. And that's when I will end today's lecture, and tomorrow we'll discuss even deeper. So you have an equation in front of you. So you can see already that uh, so here we are looking at the driving force for the nucleation and and the growth, which is the difference between chemical potential of the molecule in the supersaturated state and the saturated solution, basically C divided by Cs. And please remember, temperature has already come here. And so, uh, so you can understand this entire picture by this cartoon. So, if you have high chemical potential for a particle, so it would like to give the atoms away. It would like to dissolve back. If it has low chemical potential, so it is willing to receive actually. So that you can see already there is a gender bias. This guy who is shown as a uh, 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 you know, receiver is shown as a poor guy, is a man, and I think she's a woman actually, right? I'm just for humor. Okay, so how does nucleation get triggered? That's a very interesting question actually, and so the answer is there. Local energy fluctuation, local density fluctuation always takes place. For example, in the macro environment, there may be a slightly higher temperature, so nucleation will start there, or so there are many ways. So this slide is highly important. In a solution where mean energy is provided by the supersaturation is constant, there must be some energy fluctuation in order to start obtaining embryos, which then transform to nuclei and then further crystal. Please note that there is always an energy barrier to form a new phase. It does not mean that you have a supersaturation and then you're all set. It's not like that. So this energy fluctuation, local energy fluctuation, provides initial push that this thermodynamic barrier, what we were discussing earlier, that is crossed, and there is the phase formation has enough triggers. So this energy fluctuation might be happening at various places in the beaker, right? It's not just the one place. Maybe thousands of places in the beaker at a given time where this tiny, you need a very like nanomolar or area or something, nanoliter area somewhere where this entire process is happening, right? Initially, they randomly diffuse, as we have already discussed, and then they meet, they coalesces, and but they dissolve back because the size is less than the critical radius. We'll see that critical radius in few minutes. So it does not mean that, I mean, what it means that even if the thermodynamic barrier is crossed and that new phase embryo it is forming, okay, so that does not guarantee that all the nuclei will grow. And okay, it's like uh, death of smaller stars. Basically, they may not survive. Smaller planets, actually, they may just remain unstable because the gravity is not sufficient to hold the planet together. Actually, you need really a so another if you can see actually that even in our universe, when you have a smaller, less dense planet and a massive, many, millions time massive a star passes by, okay, then this smaller planet will wobble. It will deform actually. It deforms actually. The mass get pulled towards the big star, and this one particle gets one small part of this smaller planet or a moon. It can be a moon actually of some other star. It gets separated and then merge with the larger star. It all the time happens in the universe that smaller bodies of matter, they get swallowed by more dense, more with big amount of gravity, right? It's always happening, and they keep on gobbling up smaller planets actually. Same thing. So you can consider that actually an analogy with the process which happens actually in your beaker. If you think what is happening in your beaker, you get a picture of your galaxy or your Milky Way or entire universe actually. There's a universe inside your beaker actually, if you think like that. Okay, uh, but you have to think in a philosophical way. You will find the entire universe there, and universe was actually formed not very. I mean, you're forming a new phase there, so it's a serious thing actually. Okay, and similar like a birth of humans, birth of an idea inside the. I was discussing with the Monica Khalawat. One we were sitting, I don't know, two of us were there. So when we were done with the paper, I told her that this nucleation growth, like how the idea nucleates, how it grows, how we grow, like in the mother's womb actually, how this sing from a single cell, right? There are okay, that starts growing actually. Okay, so and the different organs, they start growing, and it's a very interesting story actually. Okay, so this is already, we have already discussed that we need to exceed a critical value of energy. It's not always that there is a guarantee that each embryo or each nucleus will be. I mean, here many times there is a confusion in the literature. Embryo is used for nuclei is used for seeds, but I'm not using. I'm using more modern definition, where nuclei is basically where I have already introduced. That's the reason that I have already introduced yesterday what I mean by nuclei. But here it is different places it is used. So I think there should not be any confusion in your mind. The concept should be clear. The terms will not never confuse you if your concepts are clear in your brain. So it does not matter what language or what term you use. Yes, so there is a analogy of phase transition of water to ice. So so there is a metastable phase, and so you keep on cooling, and then there won't be any nucleation event, and then suddenly boom, you have a energy fluctuation, and then you have millions of heterophase, what you call it. You can call as a heterophase, which is again a nuclei, and this heterophase fluctuation has to exceed a critical radius, which is determined by. We'll discuss it. I'll give you the equation by a driving force of crystallization and interfacial energy gamma. Surface, what we call it like surface or interface energy. Here we are using interfacial energy because there is an interface. It's not just we use surface energy when outside you have a vacuum, but here outside the medium is another liquid. There is another phase, so it's always safer to use solid liquid interface. There can be solid interface because in the solution, see, in a typical solution there are so many interfacial energy. there is a solid liquid interface. There is a solid solid for heterogeneous nucleation. Because solid is trying to nucleate at another solid. Or secondary nucleation is also there. You need solid solid interfacial energy, and they're very different, right? Because a solid can be an amorphous assembly of atoms or a crystalline assembly, while liquid, the molecule arrangement is completely very different actually, right? The density, and then there is a difference in the. So when you have a picture of solid, you have to think very differently, right? And anisotropy comes into the picture, which is typically dropped. It is not considered. I will discuss with you about that. Here, interfacial energy of all the surfaces of nucleus is taken as uniform, which is not the case, right? Every uh, every interface, every crystalline facet, you have different facets actually. Every face may have a different so there is an anisotropy built in. When the matter is formed, matter is not three-dimensionally uniform. Please try to note that. It's not like spherical ball always. Assume that as a spherical ball. We'll do that because we are discussing a radius or radii. When we discuss radius, that masses goes out, that probably everything is spherical around that. But it's a big illusion which we create in the people's mind. It's for our mathematical uh, uh, convenience that we take it as isotropic system. But actual system is far more complicated. I showed you the pictures of the clusters, those 6-atom rhodium clusters. You could see that those 6 atoms are sitting in a different geometry. Same thing when you're adding more and more atom. So the addition of atom, even at the nuclei level, is not the same in all 3 dimensions. You understand? So anisotropy is not just in the well-formed bulk crystal. It starts from that dimensional anisotropy. I mean, from atomic arrangement, only the electronic uh, property inhomogeneity comes. 3-dimensionally, the electronic properties are different. Electronic properties are not the same in all the direction. I think you know about that, right? Okay, so that decides everything, like optical properties, magnetic properties, and their directional anisotropies. So we'll move to the next slide. So now we have an equation. So there are 2 terms competing with each other. One is the surface term, and another is the volume term. And this is the energy difference, which needs to be. We'll discuss that. We'll try to do some partial differentiation here, but let me erase it. So you can see that it's very simple to understand. Volume is the volume of the particle which you have formed, right? This is the volume. You can if suppose this is radius, suppose it is spherical, with the radius r. So the volume will be 4 divided by 3 pi r cube, right? And you have a surface area you can calculate. So S and B you already know, and omega is the volume of uh, the monomer or the atom, whatever is the smallest building block which was available to you in the solution to form this particle. You understand? So this is essentially a number. It's a unitless number actually. Okay, because you have total volume, and this is volume and volume actually. So you have a number of molecule inside this crystal, whatever you call it, right? Gamma is the interfacial energy, right, of solid and the liquid phase. Okay, so this is taken as, we are considering this as an isotropic system, so we'll consider this as the gamma, but as a uniform, as a unique number, as a, okay, uniform number. But Had it been a cube or something else, which is actually the case, right? Or different geometries. So you have to consider gamma different for different surfaces. It's not the same, but here just to give you a feeling, we are considering it as a single number, which is energy here, right? Gamma is energy, and C and CS you already know. Beta is again a unitless here. T is the temperature. Okay. So there is a competition. So when you create a new surface, it costs energy, and uh, new volume basically you gain energy. So one is so there is a competition, and that competition leads you to decide whether that nuclei that radius will be optimized, or that will be stable or not. So you can rewrite this equation by putting this, if you, for a spherical nucleus, you can just put, from volume, you can put 4 by 3 pi r cube. For surface, you can just put 4 pi r square, nothing else. There is no complex mathematics. And simply by your 12th standard or 11th standard knowledge, you can just take derivative of this as a function of radius, and you can easily do that. I think all of you are capable of doing that. So you will have and then you put equal to 0, right? You can, I think one of you can solve it, and there is a negative sign, right? So by solving by putting it to 0, you can easily get the critical radius, right? When so basically if you what we are doing is we have this surface energy term and the volume energy term, which is negative in sign. Surface energy term is positive in sign, and this is your total delta G. So you are taking a derivative of this curve. Basically, you're taking the slope and putting slope is equal to slope 0. So you can see that here at this point the slope is 0. When you're taking the derivative of this curve as a function of r, basically what you're doing, you're putting a derivative is nothing but slope, right? So you're taking the slope as 0. So this is the point. So this is basically your r star critical radius. So any nuclei which is less than this size will dissolve back, and any nuclei which is larger than that will stay and will keep on growing actually, right? So this is the summary, and you can now you can put it in a different way. So now you can learn a lot from this equation. Let me remove this. Okay. So if you look at this carefully, R is inversely proportional to T. Now what it means, if you are carrying out your reaction at a slightly lower temperature, your critical radius will be larger. Okay, suppose you're carrying out a reaction and your reaction temperature has decreased. So you need to grow the nuclei larger in order they will remain stable. Otherwise, they will dissolve back. So it is always so if you want to, so this is basically, so that's the reason that you try to carry out the reaction at a higher temperature. So what is the reason that slightly higher temperature side reactions are more successful? It will give you more monodispersed particles, because the reason is that you have more tendencies of creating. Obviously, you are creating a reaction kinetics. That is one thing. You're creating the you are creating the diffusion limited interaction, because the monomers will have more energy to diffuse. That is one thing. Second thing is that the critical radius will shift at higher temperature towards the low radius. So even smaller radius, suppose you have 1 million radius, 1 million nuclei which are formed, which are very small. So they will have more tendency to gobble up more and more monomer supply and finish off all the monomers, and then they will grow, right? They will not wait for, so they will not wait for critical radius to grow beyond certain size, because in that time new nuclei are also forming. So it will take more time. You got my point? So it is always advantageous to shift slightly R star. So as the reaction proceeds, your monomer supply is depleting. So what happens that your R star starts shifting. So your R star is not the same. It depends upon the concentration also. Please note that. Depends on the concentration also, because it depends upon beta. If there is a change in the concentration, there is a change in the concentration of the monomer because monomers are being consumed. So please note that your beta is changing all the time. Suppose beta is going down because your monomer supply is going down, so R star will go up. Now R star will go up. What will happen? You will likely to get. So it is called size focusing actually. So if your reaction is taking long time, if you give a second shot of a monomer, sometimes people do like that. That's the reason that they most of the time, to avoid this problem, what people do, they do this hot injection colloidal synthesis where they carry out the reaction at very high temperature. So they inject it and immediately the reaction is done. So if you do it very fast, so if you carry out the reaction for longer time, so there is a problem that there will be this R star will keep on shifting, and that may be another reason that you start getting polydispersed particle. Okay, because beta is changing, gamma is also changing. Please note that gamma is not like uh, uh, some absolute number, right? Temperature must not change. If temperature is going down and going up, you're basically messing up your R star. Okay, and omega is definitely not changing. Omega is basically your volume of your monomer, which can be your atom or molecule, whatever is the smallest building block. So now you have fairly good idea that how what decides your typical reaction and why do you get sometimes polydisperse and monodisperse. So if you meditate on this equation, you will get a fairly good idea. And you can massage this equation. I'm not going to into this equation, but then you can put this R star into this equation, right? You can replace this R with this. So you can actually, what exactly you are doing, that once you calculate R, so you want to calculate this delta G star. So this you can easily do that. That's what it's done here, right? Okay. So this can be easily done by if you put R star there. So I think it is clear that how this activity how is a role in deciding this complex science. So with this, I will end today's lecture, and let us discuss now.
Sir?